You are listening to audio from Rosemont Baptist Church, located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you would like to know more about us or to find service times, please visit us at our website, www.rosemontbaptist.com. The link will also be in the episode notes if you are listening to us in a podcast app, along with the link for giving to our ministry as well. Our prayer is that what you hear today will be for God's glory and your joy. All right, Luke chapter 6, if you will, this morning. Luke chapter 6. We're going to finish from verse 39 down to verse 49 here this morning. We've been looking at the Sermon on the Mount now for the last several weeks, and we've gone over it in a fair amount of detail here this morning. And what we have left for us in verses 39 through 49 are a series of parables that Jesus gives. They're in line with much of what he has already given us over the course of this sermon, but he's shifting a little bit. As we've gone from verses 20 all the way down to verse 38, Jesus has been more focused on laying down new ethics, new truths, revealing new realities, and that's what we've spent the last few weeks looking on. Understanding what it is that he's looking for in the kingdom, having our expectations perhaps flipped in many situations, having realities flipped on us in certain things. We're seeing things in a different way. We're seeing things through his way, not in the way that is natural to us and to our way of thinking and to our way of doing things, and not oftentimes to the way that things have been taught to us. If you had been listening to the Pharisees during this period of time, this was quite a change for you. Or this is different than what you've expected. And most of us just walking into life, thinking things our way, listening to the way that perhaps the world around us is doing things, this is also quite a flip in the way that things are going. And so that's what's been laid out, these series of ethics, this series of truths, the series of realities that have been laid out that are different, that are new, and that are frankly stunning. Right, you don't expect those, and in many ways you find them inconvenient and uncomfortable. You don't really want them to a certain reality, and that's what we've been looking at. As we get to verses 39 through 49, though, we still are laying out truth. This is still Jesus trying to impart truth, trying to teach and inform. But the emphasis is coming less on here is new truth that I am giving to you, and it is more on what are you going to do with the truth that I have given you. What are you going to do with it? This is Jesus in essence from verse 39 to 49 through a series of parables that he gives, and we'll walk through them at a fairly high level. But this is Jesus in essence at the end of all of the things that he has taught them, all of the truths that he has said, all of the ethics that he has laid out. It is Jesus saying, this is what I have said, now what are you going to do? And that really is the crux of what he is getting at. This sermon has not just been to tickle their minds. It has not just been for entertainment. It has not just been to fill up space. We need to do something, so here we're going to do something here for a minute. It's not just a bunch of you people came and now I've got to give a speech, so here's a speech, right? That is not what this whole series has been about. It has been, here's a series of truths, and these truths demand to be acted upon. They must be acted upon. I've given you these truths. You've heard my words. Now what are you going to do with them? And that's where Jesus is getting at here this morning. So let me read verses 39 through 49, and then we'll pray. And then we're going to look at the four things that Jesus wants us to watch. All right? He gives us four things to watch as we work through these parables, and we'll look at those this morning. So verse 39 here. He also told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, brother, let me take out the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck that is in your brother's eye. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of a heart his mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, a stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who has built his house on the ground without a foundation. And when the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. Let's pray. Father, we thank you this morning, and we come to praise you for who you are. Father, as we have sung this morning, we have extolled how gracious you are. We have extolled your wisdom. We have extolled all these things about you that make you so great and so wonderful. It is your power. It is your mercy. It is your grace. It is your goodness. Father, it is your sovereignty over all of the affairs of man and over everything that is going on in this world. Father, you are so wise. You know all things, Father, and it puts you in a place that is so far above us that we can draw some comparisons, but they just pale in comparison to who you really are. As we think this morning, as we listen to the words of Jesus, Father, that becomes so important for us. That you would know all of these things, that you would be so far above us, and yet would decide to send your Son to reveal things to us, to reveal your truth to us, to reveal yourself to us, that we would know you and could see you and can understand you in some sort of a way. Father, is simply another evidence of your grace and your mercy. But it can't just be something that we listen to. It can't just be something that we hear. It must be something that is acted upon. It's reality. It's truth. It reflects something that is real. So give us grace this morning as we look at the words of Jesus, as we consider what he has laid out for us. Give us grace to not only praise you for doing this for us, but give us grace to act as well. And may we see the importance of that here this morning. So give me clarity of words and clarity of thought, and may you be glorified as we think through this. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. As you look at these series of parables, we're going to kind of split them up into these four things to watch. The first one shows up in verses 39 and 40. This is the first thing that Jesus wants you to watch. And he wants you to watch who you follow. Jesus wants you to watch who you follow there. As you look down at these series of parables, everything from verse 39 to verse 40, one commentator that I read behind describes them as being comical. And this is not in the sense of something that really wants to make you chuckle and laugh out loud or find great amusement in it. But it's because when you look at what is being described, on its face, they're all absurd. Everything that he is bringing up in verse 39 to 49 is absolutely absurd. Right? The idea that someone would be walking around with a beam in their eye, right? Just extending out, protruding so far out there, and then worried about the little tiny speck of sawdust in someone else's eye. It's absurd to think about that. The idea that I would go out to a bramble, that I would go out to a thorn bush and expect to find grapes. It doesn't make any sense. It's absurd on its face. The idea that I would go and build a house without any foundation. Just find a piece of ground and just start putting something up and expect that to hold up and expect that to stand the test of time. It's absurd, right? It was absurd in Jesus' day. It's absurd in our day. And everything that Jesus is bringing up from 39 to 49 is that kind of level of absurdity. There is a comic value to them in that they are just almost cartoonish. It is just absurd, the ideas that Jesus is presenting here. And it's intended to do that. I think one that may take the cake, though, is what's going on in verse 39. Right? If you're trying to compile a list of things that will most certainly result in disaster, verse 39 is very high on that list, right? Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? It's absurd. To imagine that you would be walking down a road one day, walking down the sidewalk, and you would see a blind individual leading another blind individual, trying to navigate an uneven terrain, trying to navigate any kind of environment. It is absolutely absurd. Who knows what could go wrong, right? They will most certainly fall into a pit. They will most certainly fall into something. Something will happen to these two individuals. They are without hope whatsoever, right? This is high on the list of things that could possibly go wrong. And Jesus knows that. And we know that as soon as we start to think about it, right? This is not something that's going to end up well here. As Jesus is going rapid fire through these parables, and he moves very quick into verse 49, if we're not thinking, we're going to miss the connection that he is making here. He drops 39, and then he drops 40, and they're meant to go together. They are complementary in the way that they interact. In verse 40, a disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. This is an easy parable to understand. We can understand that clearly. If a teacher must be greater than his disciples, right? If the students were as good as the teacher, why would they be there? You wouldn't need that. You wouldn't be sitting under someone if you knew all of the same material that this person came to. You come to that person, you ask that person, will you teach me? Because you know something that I want to know. You know something that I need to know. Now, the teacher is always going to be greater than the student. He is the one that has maybe come up with this. He is the one that has mastered this and that has developed this in some way. But if the student continues to work with the teacher, continues to sit at his feet for any period of time, eventually he will start to know the same things, right? And you will start to achieve some sort of a parity. Right, you could in turn go out and teach someone else because you have learned, you have spent the time, you have put in the effort, and eventually you will reach to the same level as that teacher. This is exactly what Jesus is trying to do. We're right on the heels of Jesus having called these disciples. The people who are around Jesus, they recognize what that looks like. You and I would recognize what that looks like. The problem is, what if your teacher is wrong? What if your teacher is blind? This is where these two passages are complementary, right? The teacher is always going to be greater than the student, but the student is eventually going to reach the level of a teacher. That's wonderful if your teacher actually knows what's going on. That's wonderful if your teacher actually has truth that he can impart to you. But what if that teacher is steeped in something that is totally wrong? What if your teacher is just far out in left field? If you continue to labor under that teacher, where are you going to be? You are going to be far out in left field right there with him, right? And this is what Jesus is trying to highlight here. He's starting to really lay out a contrast between himself and someone else, right? You can go follow, you can go listen to someone else, and you could absorb all these things from them, and you could sit there and spend years learning at their feet, and you will become as great as they are. But if they are wrong, if they are going down the wrong path, you too are going to be going down the wrong path. And you will then be teaching others to go down the wrong path, and it will simply perpetuate and simply continue and simply to go from there. But if you are coming along behind someone who is giving you truth, and not just giving you truth, but is the revelation himself, right? When you think about how John introduces Jesus, and he calls him the Logos, the Word. This is the revelation of God. This is the revelation that God has given to man in flesh, incarnate. To follow that is something else entirely. That is not going to lead you down a path that is wrong. That is going to lead you into truth. And when you begin to grow into that, as you begin to develop into that, who should you be looking like? You will be looking like him. You will be walking in the ways that he has instructed you to. You will be walking in the ways that please him, right? This is what Jesus is laying down here. Watch who you are following. You will either absorb the blindness of this age, you will absorb the blindness of religious teachers that will multiply like weeds, or you will follow me, you will absorb my teaching, and you will walk away knowing what is true. He is giving them what is true. That's what he's been doing this entire sermon. This is what he will do throughout all of his ministry. He is giving them truth. He is giving them a revelation of the Father. He is showing and teaching everything that the Father has instructed him to do. If you follow him, Jesus says, if you follow me, then you will walk in a way that is right. You will become like me. Not that you will achieve my who I am or become who I am, but you will walk in a way that is righteous. You will walk in a way that is pleasing. Jesus is starting to separate himself. I am not just another Pharisee that's coming on the scene. I'm not just another of these religious teachers that you are used to and that you are comfortable with and that come through on a regular basis and do their little circuit and come through with their disciples. This is something else entirely. I am something else entirely, and I am giving you truth. And you will either be listening to me and following me in the way that I am laying down, or you will be following those who are blind and going down that way with them, and you will most certainly fall into a pit, right? Most certainly you will run into disaster because of who you are following. So watch who you're following. If your teacher is wrong, then you will end up in the wrong place. Don't follow the wrong teacher. Follow me, right? He is laying out, he is separating himself. There is a difference between what I am doing and what they are doing. It may look the same. They have disciples, I have disciples. It may look the same in terms of the format and the venue, but the reality and the truth are very, very different. What will you do with what I'm saying? I'm giving you truth. Follow in my truth, because the alternative will lead in disaster, right? So the first thing that he wants you to watch is watch who you're following. Right? Do not follow a blind person. Follow someone who is speaking the truth. The second thing that he gets to in verses 41 through 42 with this next parable is to watch how you correct others. To watch how you correct others. 41 through verse 42 are highly memorable, right? It is hard to look at these verses and not remember them in some capacity. And it's hard, you frequently find it even coming into place in areas that you don't necessarily expect it to. It's memorable enough that people latch onto it. They understand what is going on there. It, just like the blind leading the blind, is absurd, right? Individual is walking around there in verse 41 with a log in his eye. You may have plank in your translation. Log, plank, heavy beam comes into mind. This is not something small. This is not a little twig or a small stick that is sticking out of your eye. This thing is big, right? If you're thinking a heavy beam, you're thinking about something that is a beam in a house, right? That which a lot of weight is being put on. This is no small piece of wood that is there. This is a huge piece of wood that is sticking out of someone's eye. And it should be abundantly obvious to anyone. And it should most certainly be abundantly obvious to the person who is looking through it. Right? This cannot be good. This cannot be right. And yet this individual is so focused on this speck that is in someone else's eye. Right? Same, perhaps the same material. Maybe it's sawdust, just like made of wood, just like what is sticking out of the person's eye. But it is infinitesimal compared to the other one. So small, it is so tiny. And how could the person with the log sticking out of his eye even see that? How could he even perceive that this other person has something like that in his eye? Right? It's an absurd situation. But Jesus is hinting at something here. He has gone very heavy about not judging. He has gone very heavy in the previous passage about not condemning someone. But that doesn't mean that instruction doesn't need to be given. It doesn't mean that we now say that, well, you can't ever instruct anyone about anything, right? Because that's not right. That can't be how this functions. Jesus himself is instructing people about things. Jesus himself is laying out this is what's right and this is what's wrong, right? That is part of life. That is part of what is to be expected, right? So this is Jesus. We're not in a situation, and Jesus is never saying that you never instruct someone for what is right, which means you have to know what is right, and you never say that this is wrong, which means you have to come to a knowledge of something that is wrong, right? There are still times of instruction. There are still times that something must be done. And you'll notice here that Jesus, when he is mentioning this, has no word of commendation to give in either of these situations. Jesus is not saying it's okay to walk around with a speck in your eye, or it's okay to walk around with a log in your eye. He's not saying that. What Jesus is narrowing in on is hypocrisy. That's what he's narrowing in on. Verse 42, you hypocrite. That is what he has a problem with. It is not that it's better to have a speck in your eye than it is to have a log in your eye. Neither of you should have anything in your eyes. Right? None of us want anything in our eyes. That is a healthy condition, to have nothing in your eyes. But it is especially unhealthy, it is wrong, to have a log sticking out of your eye and to point your finger at someone else who's got the speck in your eye and say, let me address that. Let me take care of that here, right? Because the individual with a log in his eye has a requirement to take care of that. The individual with a log in his eye has taken no care to himself. He has never examined himself. He's not thinking about his own condition and worrying about that. He's worried about this tiny speck that's in someone else's eye. And what Jesus is saying is that hypocrisy has no place in the kingdom. Hypocrisy has no place in the kingdom. And I think this, in conjunction with what we've already seen in verses 39, I think Jesus probably has the Pharisees in mind at this point. The Pharisees are one group of people that Jesus will hammer at over and over again. We've already seen that they are butting heads, they are in conflict. And if ever there is a group of individuals that hypocrisy is what you associate with and what Jesus associates them with, it's this group of individuals, right? And what's interesting is that Jesus, when he talks about them, presents two different sides to what they are doing. On the one hand, he will note that they are sitting in Moses' seat and need to be listened to. On the other hand, he will say they are whitewashed graves full of dead men's bones. And the reality is that both are true. Both are true. The Pharisees were right in some things. They were very concerned about keeping righteousness. They were very concerned about the law. They were very concerned about instruction in what is right and what is good. That's fine. The problem was they didn't do it. That's the problem, right? And this is what Jesus is getting at here. If you are going to be instructing someone, you must also be obeying the thing that you're instructing them in, right? Hypocrisy has no place in the kingdom. If I am going to come alongside someone and say, you must do such and such, what must I be doing? I must be doing such and such, right? There is no place for a double standard. There is no place for this is good for you, but I don't have to do that myself, right? As the saying goes, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? We understand that. We recognize that. But there is always the temptation in someone who is correcting, maybe someone who is in a position where they need to be instructing. There is always the temptation to kind of focus on someone else and not worry about myself quite so much. And what Jesus is saying is there's no place for that in the kingdom, right? He is looking for obedience, and he's looking for an obedience that is consistent. Right? We are setting up a standard, and we are looking for a standard that is consistent, right? The truths that I have laid down, the ethics that I have laid down, the realities that I have laid down, they apply to all equally. It doesn't apply more to you than it does to me. It doesn't apply more to this person than it does to this person over there. It applies to all equally. The expectations are the same, the realities are the same, and the obedience should look exactly the same. There will be times of instruction. There should be times of instruction. But that instruction should come from someone who is equally as committed to obedience as the person who is being instructed is expected to be doing. Right? There is no room for hypocrisy. Instruction will come, but it's going to have to be obeyed. So watch how you correct others. Watch how you correct others. Right? This is what Jesus is saying. Watch it. Right? Watch who you are following, and watch how you correct others. These are two things that must be watched for, because hypocrisy has no place in the kingdom. Following on the heels of that, and I think quite logically then, comes verses 43 and 45. Another parable that is being laid out here. Jesus goes into a series of agricultural proverbs, right? So no good tree bears bad fruit, and again, does a bad tree bear good fruit? For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. These are things that we understand, right? These are things that we understand. Jesus' listeners most certainly understood this. That was primarily an agricultural society. Everything is revolving around that for the most part. They are growing things. They are processing things that have been grown. Everything is coming down to that. We're a little less removed from that, admittedly, but we still mostly understand everything that Jesus is saying here. I expect that an apple tree produces apples. I expect that a peach tree produces peaches, right? I never have once expected to go out into the middle of a wheat field and harvest a pineapple. It doesn't work that way. Fall is coming up, and there will be pumpkin patches that people will go to visit, right? And never once has anyone gone to a pumpkin patch and picked a grapefruit. It will not happen. It never has happened. It never will happen. That's not how this works, right? If you are a pumpkin vine, you will produce a pumpkin. If you are a stalk of corn, you will produce corn. That's how this works, right? And this is the idea that Jesus is grabbing at here, right? If you are something that is good, if you are someone who is good, you will produce things that are good. If you are someone who is bad, you will produce things that are bad, right? And while it is not my job to come in and condemn you necessarily in those things, I can look it's not too hard to look, though, at what's going on and say, well, this is good or this is bad. And if I know that this is good or if I know that this is bad, and you are going to produce those things because that's who you are, what do I know about you? I know whether you're good or bad. Right? And this is the simplicity with which Jesus is talking. It works this way agriculturally. It works this way personally. This is what is going on here. He expresses it then again in verse 45, right? This is where he makes it so clear. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. And I always have enjoyed verse 45, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. There is this overflowing nature that is inside of us that is going to come out. You can't bottle it up. You can't restrain it and hold it down in some capacity. The words that I speak, they come out of the abundance of my heart. The actions that I pursue, they come out of the abundance of my heart. And I can look at those, and you can look at those, and you can say, this is good or this is bad. And it's obvious. It's out there. It's public knowledge. You're not having to go down and think about my motives or think about, where's he coming from when he did that or when he said that, right? You can look at them at face value and say, this is what's out here. This is what is going on here. Remember that this is coming on the heels of the idea of hypocrisy back there in verse 42. Right? We've just been dealing with hypocrisy. And the problem with the hypocrisy is not that you're necessarily looking and you're seeing the problem in someone else's eye. The problem is what? The problem is there's an enormous beam, there's an enormous log sticking out of your own eye. And so if Jesus immediately begins to proceed to what is coming out of your heart, what is it more likely that Jesus is focused on? Is he more focused on us looking at someone else and thinking about the little specks that we're finding in their eyes? Or is he more asking us to look at ourselves and say, what's going on in you? And I think it's the latter. I think what Jesus is expressing here is that there is a desire for a spirit of introspection. Jesus is asking us to watch our own actions. He wants us to watch our own actions, right? The problem with the hypocrite in the previous passage is that person is not doing that. That person is spending all of their time, they're looking at this over here, and they're looking at that over there, and they're looking at this person, and they spend no time looking in the mirror, looking at themselves and saying, what is it that I've said this week? What is it that I did 10 minutes ago? What is it that I've been doing for the last 30 days? What is it that I've been doing for the last year? Am I growing in a good way? Am I seeing things that are in my life that are positive, that are good? Am I encouraging anyone in any way? Am I speaking things that are righteous? Am I telling lies? Right? Am I running a falsehood that is in front of someone else and putting on a show that is absolutely false, and I know it, I'm not too worried about it. Right? What am I doing? Because if I am looking at myself and if I am examining the things that I am doing, then I will know very clearly this is what is going on in my heart. And I think this is where Jesus is getting at. It is true for someone else. That is absolutely true. But given the fact that Jesus is following up on the heels of hypocrisy, I think Jesus is expecting his disciples to spend a little more time looking at themselves and saying, what's down in my heart? Because the things that I am saying, they're coming out of my heart. The things that I am doing, they're coming out of my heart. And it's the abundance that is coming out. Is the abundance that is down inside my heart good? Or is the abundance that is down inside my heart bad? I should be able to know. I should be able to look at it. I shouldn't have to have someone else come along and point it out to me. Right? There is a spirit of introspection that Jesus is wanting. He wants us to watch ourselves. And if this is true, then the kingdom and the inhabitants of the kingdom are meant to judge themselves. They are meant to look at themselves. They are meant to judge themselves and to say, where am I? Am I doing what is right? Am I doing what is wrong? Am I following the commands that I have heard Christ speak, or am I not following the commands that I have heard Christ speak? Am I looking at someone else and not looking at what is going on inside my own heart? Right? The inhabitants of the kingdom are meant to be introspective. And this is difficult. It is far easier to be on the other side of this. It is far easier to spend your time looking at someone else and saying, I don't think that was right. I wouldn't have done that if I were them. I don't know about that. It is much more difficult for me to stop and take a moment and say, what about me? Where am I at? What am I doing? Right? And what Jesus is desiring is that this kingdom is full of individuals who are introspectively looking at themselves and saying, where am I? What is going on? Am I a good tree? Am I a bad tree? Am I a thorn? Am I a thorn bush that's producing thorns? Am I a grapevine that's producing grapes? Who am I and what am I doing? We should be watching our own actions. We should be looking and examining and seeing what is going on, because our hearts are on display in the words that we're speaking and the actions that we're doing. So watch your actions. Finally then, and this is where everything is heading up, is verses 46 through 49 here, where Jesus is really imploring us to watch what you do with Jesus' words. Watch what you do with Jesus' words. Verses 46 and 47, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. When Matthew gives his account of this passage, Matthew presents it a little bit differently. Matthew presents it as being someone who is building on a rock versus someone who is building on sand. Luke here, in my opinion, actually makes this a lot simpler. Either you have a foundation or you don't have a foundation. And the idea is really roughly the same, and probably what Jesus has in mind is if you are in this part of the world, if you're in this part of the country, you are going to have areas that are going to be dry for a good period of time. But then when the rainy season does come, that dry area may become a river. It may become a creek. Right? There's a lot of runoff that's going to come off very quickly. The ground is relatively dry. It's not going to be able to absorb much of that, and it's going to go. And so it's possible that you could find an area that's real nice and flat, that looks really good, but that could be a very bad spot to build in. Right? And this could be the idea. When the stream is coming up and beating against the house because you have built in some place that is going to maybe prone to flash flooding during one of these heavy rainstorms, you are either going to be having a house that has a foundation that's going to be able to withstand that, or it's just going to wash right down. Right? And we've all seen plenty of news footages to see what happens when a house just goes right down a river. Right? We know what that looks like, and this should be in our mind. So Luke's is a little bit simpler, but they're really both getting at probably the same idea and the same thing. Luke, though, breaks it back to one central point in verses 46 and 47. And this is this: you cannot call me Lord and not follow my teachings. You cannot call me Lord and not follow my teachings. This is where we see Jesus building. Right? He has already said you can follow a blind person or you could follow someone who knows what is going on. We have seen him concerned with hypocrisy, where someone is instructing someone to do something, but they don't do it themselves. We have seen Jesus talk about this need for an inward gaze, to look and see what you are producing, because that tells you who you are. It tells you what is in the abundance of your heart. Here Jesus arrives, and we're building on all of those ideas. We're building on all of that, but now we come with a warning. If you do not follow my words, if you do not listen to what I am saying, you will have nothing to show for yourself. Everything will be washed away. Everything will be gone. And as you think that through, there's a number of reasons why that could be true. Why could everything suddenly be gone? Why could everything suddenly have simply washed away and there's nothing left to show for yourself? Well, it could be that you follow the blind man. And he told you, do this, build this way, be over here, and guess what happens? That was a pit. That was an awful idea, right? But you followed a blind man, right? And this is what leads you to this point. Maybe you've been instructing someone else on what they should be doing, telling them how to do it, but you haven't done it yourself. Where does that lead you? Same exact spot. You weren't following what you're supposed to do, and you weren't on the path that you were meant to have done. Now you have nothing to show for yourself. Maybe you never sat down and took an account of what you were doing. Just walking through life aimlessly, just going about things, just living day by day, running from one thing to the next, never stopping to consider, what am I doing? Am I doing what is right? Am I doing what is wrong? And guess what happens when you get to the end? It's all gone, right? There's nothing left to be done. Or maybe you claim to have followed Jesus Christ, but you never actually followed through. You said you do. Oh, I do. Oh, I do this. But I never followed through. Any of those circumstances, any of those patterns of behavior ends you up in exactly the same spot in verses 48 through 49. They all end in the same spot, right? You have not built your house on a rock. You built your house without a foundation. And at the end, there is nothing that is left to be seen for it. It's gone. It's washed away. It's wiped out, right? There is nothing of any value. And so all of these parables actually converge here at this point. Do you listen to the words of Jesus, and do you do them? That is where all of these parables are converging to, with the additional input here in this final parable of saying there is a warning at this. There are consequences for this. This is not just something that is good to practice, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of optional. Right? This is something that bears eternal significance. This is something that affects everything that is going on. Who are you following? And if you are following Jesus, are you doing what he has asked for you to do? Are you doing what he has told you? And both sides are important. Listening and doing are both equally important. Right? It is important that if I'm listening, that I am also doing, because otherwise I'm a hypocrite. And if I'm over there doing, and I have no idea, didn't listen at all, what am I doing? Who knows what I'm doing? I'm off doing something else entirely. Both sides are important. You cannot omit either side of that equation. And this is the single question that will come down for every person on the day of judgment. Did you listen to the words of Christ, and did you obey? Every single person will get judged, and it will come down to that simple concept, that simple idea. And so what Jesus is asking for, what Jesus is demanding, is for us to take a look at ourselves. He's doing this with his listeners right here. All the people who are standing there in front of him, they are hearing these words, they are hearing these series of truths and these series of ethics that he has laid out, and he is telling them in real time, everything that I have just told you, everything that I have speaking on for the last half hour, the last hour, however long this took, right? What will you do with them? And the same question is being posed to us however many hundreds of years later, right? You have heard the words of Jesus. You have listened to the words of Jesus. You have read the words of Jesus. Are you doing them? Are you obeying them? Are you keeping them? If you're a child of God, this morning, are you examining yourself? You've clearly heard the words of Jesus. You've listened, right? Maybe you've spent years looking in this. And maybe you've spent years sitting in a pew and listening. Do you examine yourself? Do you ever stop and take stock and say, well, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Are you so caught up in life and you're running and running and running and running? Or do you ever stop and say, listen, what am I doing? The words that I have said this week, what have I been saying? Where have I been going with these things? Because those will tell you whether or not you are following Christ or whether you're not. The fruit is right there. The evidence is right there before you. And it's coming out of your heart. You'll know exactly where you're at. You'll know exactly where you stand. If you are not a child of God here this morning, and this is the first time that you've heard this, right? This is the first time that you're perhaps running into Jesus, understand that this is where the criteria comes down to. Either you see who Jesus is and you accept who Jesus is and you follow who Jesus is, or you're following a blind person and you're going down into a pit and there will be nothing left to show for yourself, right? These are the words of Jesus. He gives them to us, but he doesn't give them to him simply for us to be entertained with, or simply for us to think about from a philosophical standpoint and walk away from. What Jesus asks us to do is to have an inward gaze, and he is asking us to have an obedience that is committed to following his words. Because everything will come down to whether you have listened to the words of Jesus and whether you have followed the words of Jesus. Everything comes down to that. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for what you've given us here in these parables. These are remarkably simple parables. They don't take a lot of explanation. We can see them for what they are. We can see them for face value. They are absurd pictures. And yet that absurdity sometimes is revealed in our own hearts and in our own lives. It is possible that we are living absurd lives. It is possible that we are blind people following blind people, and it's ridiculous, Father. It's entirely possible that we are individuals who know what is right, and yet we don't do it. And it's absurd. And I thank you that your Son has sent us in many ways to rescue us from absurdity. He has sent us to rescue us from absurd living. And all I can ask, Father, and all we can ask, Father, as a body here this morning, is that you truly do save us from that. You truly do keep us from living a life that is just absolutely absurd, but one instead that is focused on following the words of Christ. One that is truly committed to obedience and not excusing things that we see, not ignoring things that we see, not passing over things that we see, but an inward gaze, Father, that is present in each and every one of us that asks the question, am I following the words of Christ or am I not? Because we know, Father, that either we are building our house on a foundation or we're not. Father, and may we all desire to end up at that one same goal, to stand before you and giving the best answer that we can, Father, resting in you and what your Son has done for us. So give us grace, Father, to listen to the words of Christ and most importantly, to obey the words of Christ. I ask all this in your Son's name.